Afternoon, everybody. Thank you for joining us. I'm excited for today's discussion. We're going to be talking about low carbon leaders demonstrating pathways to zero net energy. Really excited for today's discussion. We will be doing today's conversation in a roundtable format, coming off of a really exciting US DOE summit last week. And so we'll hear more about that. Before we do, though, want to thank our sponsors, as always, LADWP and SoCalGas, for supporting our program and this content that we are putting out every month. As always, housekeeping, as always, again, attendee lines will be muted to keep things orderly. Please do submit questions, though. We want this to really be interactive. So this is roundtable with the edge, extending all the way out to all of you. That peer exchange is super important, super valuable. So we hope this is just, again, the start of that. That is the intent. So we will have time at the end for Q&A. You'll get the slides, you'll get the recording and any other resources by Friday. We actually have some juicy ones we'll be sending through this week, courtesy of NREL and some of our other partners in this. So I hope you have a good experience today and give us that feedback. So we will be going over the Low Carbon Leaders Program, some introductions, discussion, Q&A, and I will be stepping back again today and inviting some of my teammates, Christianne Schrobilgen, who's our Managing Director of Marketing, and Les Rosenberg, who leads our technical assistance, our retrofit advisory work, to ask some of the questions of our panelists today and get the perspective both on the motivation, how do we talk about this? Where does this come from in terms of corporate strategy, organizational commitment? It's really Christianne's deep expertise in that area. And of course, there's a lot of technical complexity to be considered, managed here. And Les is engineer of record on some of these projects. So will be interesting to have his perspective. Now, this is a joint initiative I'm really excited about. I mentioned with the US DOE and the National Renewable Energy Laboratory. Better Buildings Challenge ran through 2020, 20% by 2020. Nice round numbers. Those were not pulled out of the air, but developed before we had the sort of level of granularity, the level of insight that our technology today is providing. And so looking at 2030 and beyond out to 2050, what do we need to be doing today? And the answer is decarbonization, electrification of everything as quickly as possible. And there's a ton of complexity to unpack there. A couple months back, we had a conversation with some of our utility partners and city's chief resilience officer. So today, zooming down to the project level and how do we plug into that infrastructure, because these two pieces are moving in parallel and we're trying to move quickly. So how do we move in tandem and move forward together in a way that is really going to optimize the investments and drive those kind of cross-cutting benefits that we are also excited about. So our low carbon leaders, our inaugural group, we're super excited to have stepped forward to be part of this experiment. We're going on a journey, a 2-year journey here. We got to have stated public commitment as part of that and transparency. So that's really what we're hearing loud and clear, and it's been a big focus of ours for years is those proof points, those case studies. How did you do it? What did you do? What did you start with? What were the challenges? What were the barriers? What about your project is similar to mine that I can learn from? What is a good case study? I think is a question that I'm really interested in right now. And so delving into all of that as we get in here to develop what are those meaningful proof points? What are the barriers we're really still dealing with that we need to overcome through these demonstration projects and this kind of radical collaboration? So our inaugural cohort of low carbon leaders, Commonwealth Partners, are not able to join us today, but they did participate in the roundtable last week, and I think we'll have them on in a future webinar. But today, we're very lucky to be joined by team members from Douglas Emmett and MoCA, which is the Museum of Contemporary Art on Bunker Hill. Many of you hopefully have been there. Commonwealth Partners, again, they're not on today, but just to quickly acknowledge them, City National Plaza, very iconic, twin towers downtown, Bunker Hill, office and retail, mixed use, over 2 million total square feet with combined underground parking. It's really unique in that it has so much space. So looking at opportunities for storage, load shifting, fuel cells, it's going to be a fantastic site. And not to mention there's that sort of somewhat debunked central plant under there. So another interesting project. But for today, very excited to be zooming in on Douglas Emmett. They have selected an asset in the Valley, Warner Center Towers, which is a multi-building site comprised of I think 7 or 8 office buildings totaling about 2 million square feet. And the Museum of Contemporary Art and its sister facility in Little Tokyo, the Geffen Contemporary. Very different, actually couldn't be more different in terms of the construction and siting of the 2 buildings, but taken as a small portfolio represent a really interesting opportunity. And I'll leave it to the team to talk about sort of the organizational commitment, but it's very exciting to see the folks that they've convened there. So to put that in context, I'm also super proud of the showing that LA broadly had at the summit last week. We are one of the, if not the largest Better Buildings Challenge program, but it was beyond our partners. It was close to, I would say, about 20% of the total participation nationally is LA-based partners, which is just phenomenal and is so exciting to collaborate with all of you and continue to build on LA's leadership. You know, we're the #1 Energy Star city, and now we're the #1 building decarbonization city. So DOE talks about the concept of a priority waterfall. Priority meaning like loading order. What is the preferred sort of order of operations as we decarbonize a building? And I'm not going to read through all of these, but we're going to get into that today. That really is the crux. I'll actually go back to that. Over the 2 years that this journey is going to encompass, looking at all of the above options, and then ultimately zeroing out any remaining carbon through credible RECs, but fully exploring all of these other opportunities from efficiency all the way through renewables generation, and coming up with site-specific solutions that optimize around cost and the technical potential at the site. So with that, I'm going to step out and introduce our panelists today. Patrick Weber is the Director of Exhibition Production with MoCA. It's a super interesting role, obviously maintaining the safety, protecting the art itself, multiple billions of dollars in that building. It's a critical role as we're looking at HVAC and lighting and evolution of standards there. And Barry Abramson, representing the Douglas Emmett team today. He's a principal at Schrobilgen, a longtime consultant and member of Douglas Emmett's Sustainability Council. So welcome, gentlemen, and thank you for doing double duty, participating in the summit last week and jumping in again here this week to speak with all of us. Really appreciate it. With that, we will shift over to the discussion, and I'll hand it over to my colleagues, Christianne and Les. Thank you.
Hi there.
Hello.
Good to see you guys again. Welcome.
Thank you. Thanks for having us.
Sure. So let's start with why your organizations decided to sign up for low carbon leaders with LABBC.
Okay. Barry, you want me to go first or?
Sure.
Barry can go first. Yeah.
Okay. It was sort of a perfect alignment for the museum, honestly, because in October of 2020, MoCA established an environmental council. And along those lines, internally, we were, as a museum, already thinking of the importance of, reducing our carbon footprint and, bringing our facilities up to sort of, better management for the entire community and everything. So I think with the development of the council and then going through initial starts in where do we begin, we're working with a few ideas of like, how do we get started? And so we reached out to Les, actually, who has a history with us, and he introduced us to this pilot program, which just like I said, it's the perfect sort of alignment of these two things going on.
Perfect. And can you describe your role a little bit? And I know that it may be changing soon.
Yeah, my role for the past 6 years or so, I've been the director of exhibition production at MoCA. So what that means is I've been primarily responsible for working with my colleagues to install the exhibitions here. But that's kind of can be far-reaching in terms of not everything that you just see when you walk into an exhibition is that's kind of surface level. So it did require me to collaborate with the operations director, the registrars and curators down the line with all my colleagues. And then over this past year during the COVID pandemic, I sort of stepped up and assumed kind of co-responsibility for taking over operations, just as we sort of shut, unfortunately, the buildings to the public, and as many people had to pivot, our institution had to pivot, and we had to make really difficult decisions in terms of operation and stuff. So I kind of stepped into that role and see myself as increasing that in the future here with like taking over as the director of operations for MoCA.
Perfect, thank you. Barry, same question.
Okay, sure. Well, I agree that with Patrick, this is a perfect timing situation. Douglas Emmett has had a focus on energy efficiency in their portfolio for over 20 years. But over the last few years, that's brought into other sustainability realms, including water and waste, things like that. But then, both internally and among investors, there's been more and more pressure on looking at greenhouse gas emissions, decarbonization. And I think that coming out of the pandemic, when we were all focused on making sure our buildings were operating to make the indoor environments as safe as possible for occupants, and then seeing this pilot program for decarbonization opportunity roll out was sort of the perfect timing, because there's sort of a pent up need to really get on top of this with a strategy and a plan in place. Coming out of a situation where we really couldn't focus on it as the primary thing in terms of operating our buildings. But now that we're sort of moving beyond that, hopefully, where we can sort of rejuvenate that priority focus, and then having this pilot program as a way to help collaborate and network with other people doing the same thing, it just all came together great timing.
Perfect, thanks, Barry. And going back to your relationship with Douglas Emmett, can you explain your role a little bit more and how you collaborate with the rest of the project team and leadership? Yeah,
sure. So Douglas Emmett has a corporate sustainability committee. It includes the top management, financial management, their technical leadership, and as well as investor relations. And I sit on that committee as a outside consultant and help in an advisory role on engineering, energy, sustainability issues, and have been working with Douglas Emmett for over 20 years, particularly focused on their energy efficiency efforts, and now sort of helping along the way through the decarbonization pathway.
Perfect. And Barry, I'll continue on with you. I'm curious to hear a little bit more about how you selected the pilot site, and if you could describe the building a little bit.
Sure, that's a great question. It was kind of difficult to figure out because, for Douglas Emmett, they have a very large portfolio. There's, office buildings all over the area. And one thing that was helpful was to get some counsel from LABBC as well as the DOE in terms of what types of projects were being sought after for this pilot program. And the message we got from both sources was, do not pick the buildings that have the easiest path or already well underway, or you know exactly what you're going to do to get to the finish line. Pick some ones that have real challenges, because that's the purpose of the pilot program, is to help people work through the challenges and get to the finish line, but not necessarily in the predetermined path. So we picked some of the most challenging properties. Warner Center Towers is the largest single asset that Douglas Emmett has. There's 5 office towers, that comprise over 2 million square feet. There's some large parking decks. And then Sherman Oaks Galleria is also multi-building, it's office and retail, and it's also got its own challenges. So one of the criteria is certainly met on both, which is no easy, obvious path. But the other thing is that we also wanted to look at which properties had potential in all the different pieces of the waterfall. I don't know what, you don't call them buckets of a waterfall. I don't know what you call those pieces. But there's certainly energy efficiency opportunities. We can talk more about those. There's electrification opportunity. There's on-site solar potential at these sites because of the physical configuration. So we can kind of look at all those different elements and figure out how the whole waterfall is going to come together.
Yeah, and we're going to get into that in a little bit with Les. Patrick, your situation is a little different, but could you also share a little bit more about the sites?
Sure. Yeah. So MoCA in general as an entity was formed in 1979, and when it started, we didn't have a building, and so efforts were made while there was a design and a request for that for a main building. The administration at that time found a warehouse location in Little Tokyo, and for a while it was called the Temporary Contemporary, because it was only meant to be sort of the beginning space. And from my understanding, that building, I'm not quite sure what it completely dates back to, but it was an old Union hardware warehouse, and then it was LA Police Department's auto garage mechanics division. And that building I see on plans is from at least the 1940s. And that's one of our sites. That's in Little Tokyo. And then our sort of main kind of, I don't know if you'd call it our flagship site, but our sort of headquarters, if you will, is on Grand Avenue. And that building was designed by Arata Isazaki, and it was opened, I think, in 1986. And it's more of a conventional, it was built for the purposes of showcasing and showing art. Both buildings will have their challenges. Obviously, they have two different well, clearly the Geffen has a long lifespan of being many things, but for the last close to 40 years, 30 some odd years, it's been a art gallery, but it wasn't built that way. So there's a lot of challenges there, obviously. And then our building here at Grand, the Isazaki building, it in of itself is an artwork in a sense, because it's a piece of kind of showcase architecture. I mean, we take a lot of pride in it, but again, it's just like everything, it's kind of seen over the years, like we're looking at ways that we can upgrade it and continue to make it better and more efficient. And, naturally, again, for both of our museum sites to be a part of this, like, it just makes sense as far as being a museum for contemporary art and how much that just ties into the overall mission in the art world in general. Very, very essential, topic, and it's right at the forefront of like where we want to be as far as, you know, supporting arts and supporting the community and supporting the world at large for these types of issues.
Yeah, thank you. I can imagine that HVAC is extremely important, making sure that moisture levels are exactly right and whatnot. What kind of potential then do you see specifically with your Grand location?
Oh, that's a great question. And it's something that, you know, again, working with Les in the past, we've kind of already made some strides prior to now, but we look to kind of enhance that. There's a whole sort of second phase. We did an HVAC upgrade a few years back. Les, I can't remember if it was that 2018?
2017.
Okay. And there's a second phase to that for sure that we want to implement, which we did that primarily, I believe, for our gallery spaces, which is, I think, approximately 25,000 square feet. But, you know, moving into, you know, the staff office areas and some of these other sort of behind the scenes areas, which are, you know, I mean, you know, it's double the square footage, obviously, as well. So we're looking to make those upgrades there for this Grand Avenue location for sure. But as you mentioned, you know, again, like there are a lot in the museum world, it's maybe a little different from typical, you know, commercial real estate, in the sense that we do have very stringent guidelines that we have to maintain to, you know, care for our artwork. So as you mentioned, temperature and humidity and light levels are all like at the top of those sort of issues, but they're also very topical for us in this, in researching and looking for new ways to implement more efficient systems for us to still care for the artwork as well.
Awesome, thank you so much. Les, I'll hand it over to you. I'm sure folks are interested in learning a little bit more about the priority waterfall.
Mhm.
And I think that we have an image that we can pull up.
Yeah, great. Let me roll back a second and highlight what Barry and Patrick have said. The reasons we picked these two project leaders to talk about this today is, as Barry said, we picked projects among the applicants that were hard because we had this fantastic opportunity to call on NREL and DOE to get, you know, kind of the greatest scientists in energy to help us out. Barry's been working at Douglas Emmett for years, and you know they're already super energy conserving. At MoCA, in 2016, we cut their energy bill in half by HVAC retrofits and lighting retrofits. So as I said to Dave when this project started, I said, boy, you know, we need someone really smart to take this to the next level, and it's not me. And here we have DOE and NREL coming aboard to answer a lot of questions. So this is a wonderful, fantastic opportunity to help people who are already on the road. So the first step in this project was to identify on the screen you're looking at now how each of these users plans to get to the bottom of the waterfall, as we call it. Maybe I'll start with Barry and just kind of tell us how you chose the items that you picked to get us to low carbon or no carbon.
First of all, I think this concept of the priority waterfall is really critical for the entire process. You know, we are very, very strong believers that energy efficiency provides the foundation for moving into all of the other elements. And so we look at that, you know, when we looked at the two properties to try to sort of put some initial numbers to these different levels, we looked at, okay, we're supposed to be using a baseline of 2015, and that's part of the program. So we looked, okay, well, where are we at versus 2015 right now in terms of energy efficiency? And, you know, for these projects, you know, they've done a lot of things over the years, but in the last few years, not tremendously reduced, but it's about 10% below where they were in 2015 already. So we have only 90% of the way to go. We think that through some very aggressive efficiency, further retrofits at these buildings, we can reach 30 to 40% of the total in that category. And that's going to include, finishing off any lighting that's not already LED, making sure it's fully LED with good lighting controls. It means in the buildings that have older chiller plants that have, capital replacement on the agenda, to go in with high efficiency chillers, which are, maybe half the energy of what the chillers that are there now, that are vintage, 30 years old. It means looking at envelope in a new light, because a lot of times in, office buildings, especially in Southern California, we haven't been able to find a whole lot of opportunities on the envelope. And when we have, for instance, for like solar window film, it's been focused on cooling load. One of the things now, and this moves into the second row of electrification, because these buildings have gas boilers for their heating, we are looking to try to reduce heating loads as much as possible before we move to strategies to electrification. So we have a new kind of a vantage point of looking at the envelope than we ever had before. So we are looking for electrification of the gas. That's not a huge portion. It's 5 to 10% of the current carbon footprint of these buildings. On-site renewables at both sites has really good potential. We think that's 20 to 30%. And then the rest is to be determined.
Patrick, why don't you take us through what MoCA's heading for?
Okay. In general, I think, like a lot of what we're doing, I mean, it does sort of mirror what Barry's talking about too. Our two sites, obviously I mentioned there's a bit of a range in terms of how old they are. And honestly, as I mentioned earlier, and unless you kind of also confirm that, MoCA has already kind of made a dent over the past few years in terms of our better efficiency by the HVAC upgrade here at Grand Avenue and switching over just to LED actual lamps in our lighting fixtures. But there's a lot more there that I think we're seeking to do. I feel like that was just, I don't know, it was a little more than scratching the surface, obviously, if we're already making such great headway, but clearly it just kind of set up, a pathway to continue this work. And with the formation of the Environmental Council, I think our overall mission is to go carbon negative by 2030, which is a pretty ambitious thing. I would say that on some level, it's going to be maybe a little easier to do that at our Grand Avenue location, and maybe there's a lot more work at our Geffen location, simply because that's the location that I was mentioning is, a very old warehouse that's been converted into this. So our needs as far as efficiency, definitely it's been improved here at Grand Avenue, but it's largely sort of, we're in great need of that efficiency at our Geffen location. And we're already starting to look at things such as what Barry was saying, like the envelope and, insulating and things like that. And then where we get to like some exciting areas would be, really looking at increasing our electrification and not, and more so on sort of on-site renewables. So, obviously, I don't know if I want to get too far ahead because I'm sure we'll talk about it, but we're looking at things like solar, and try and move ourselves in that direction where we can begin to really be, self-reliant on some of these things as well. But, I think our two buildings are unique in a sense that I think we're going to see different challenges. And, maybe some of those are what we learn and what we do at one site will likely inform the other, even if it's not, a one-to-one kind of comparison. I think it'll help us in a certain sense. It's like we almost have two kind of like test subjects, two kind of opportunities here for us. So I think with the priority waterfall, starting with efficiency and going down to renewables, and then really getting into grid integration, I think, and how we, maybe potentially, down the line, if we are moving to solar, maybe there's a way that we can like give some of that, back, which would be great too, and would be our goal.
I'm looking forward to helping out with the case study on that one. And when I shared the webinar on LinkedIn, I was sure to tag all of the different museums too. I'm very curious to see what they're doing as well. So thank you.
Let's start again with Barry, keep it simple. What are you worried about in achieving this? What do you see as the kind of barriers and challenges to take yourself through the waterfall?
Okay, so I think that the main concern that I have is not so much the technical aspects of being able to figure out how to get to zero. It's more the financial side of it. What can we do to make sure that this process also meets the fiduciary needs of Douglas Emmett and its investors, as well as providing the process to get to zero. So that's, while that's not the sole decision criteria, it's certainly an important one, and we have to figure out the most financially responsible process here. And that's again why we're really emphasizing energy efficiency as the foundation to get as much out of that as possible before we move down the waterfall. And some of the challenges on that are how deep a retrofit how deep can we go? We're hoping to be able to piggyback off of aging HVAC infrastructure that would need capital replacement in this time frame anyway, so that we don't have to make decisions to replace equipment that has maybe a 20-year payback solely on the basis of that straight energy payback. And we're also looking to try to see what the combination impact is of doing a number of different things, in conjunction with each other. But so I think putting this together with the financial needs of it, the electrification does have some technical challenges. These buildings generally have small gas-fired hot water boilers that are serving, hot water heating systems that have, piping running throughout the buildings. So there's not, an obvious solution that's the optimum at this point, but those problems are being addressed industry-wide because of the decarbonization focus. And so we're hoping to be part of that process of figuring out the best approach there.
I noticed in all the forms that were filled out for the action plan, the financial barriers seem to rate the highest across the board, which is good news in a way for me as an engineer, because it seems like engineering wasn't the barrier, it was more financial. And in fact, one of my things on my list to talk to DOE and NREL about is to get better financial data to justify some of these projects. There's tons of data. I go through it every time I try to come up with a solution, but none of it, I think, is firm enough to take an owner into implementation. And that is really one of the goals I'm looking forward to. And one more question, what do you think the reaction of your tenants is going to be as you move through these? Is that an issue?
Well, I think many of the tenants are really on board with this whole goal, and in fact, will be excited to be a part of the process. I think that is one of the opportunities here, is for Douglas Emmett to engage with the tenants on this, because it's a really positive initiative. And there's really no adverse impact in terms of what the tenants are going to experience. There's only, if infrastructure is modernized, if lighting is improved, it's going to be an improvement in the indoor environment. And the overall goal, I think, is something that almost all, if not all, tenants will be excited about.
Great. Patrick, how about MoCA? What did you see as the main barriers to success?
Well, not to, just follow Barry and say the same thing, but yeah, definitely financial financial concerns sort of top that list. I mean, as a nonprofit organization, we rely heavily on, member support and donors, both individuals and other entities that help us operate. So I think that's just like, that's, in a way, it's sort of, I don't know if I should say it's unspoken, but it's definitely a challenge for us. And but it's also one of these things where it's exciting because we also, efficiency to me doesn't just mean like what we're trying to achieve here, but also like what's the best way to do this responsibly too, right? So I know that looking at just upgrading buildings, and I mean, I guess I would say, again, not to use our two just to use our two buildings as two different kind of test cases, but I think the challenges will be different at both. Physically, I guess I'm a little less concerned because I always feel like there's a way we can figure it out. We can do that. And I think financially, I think we have some really good colleagues here at the museum that will continue. There's a lot of interest in this. It's a very popular topic, and it should be. It's something that we like, I think as colleagues and we share that sort of interest with our public, and I think that those challenges will be, I think, met in a certain degree, but yeah, financial, and probably also along with that time. Obviously we want to get going on a lot of this stuff, and it's going to take time to understand the best way to implement things, and how we do that while still also, I think one of the things, as you asked Barry about, the tenants and the occupancy there, is like, we also have to do this while we're operating, right? We don't have that same benefit we've had over this past year where we've been working off site and, offices have been closed. And, we're really excited because we just reopened to our members right now, but we're reopening to the greater public in June. And, obviously we want to do these things. We don't want to wait, but that's always, that timing thing is what I'm saying here, is like, that might be a challenge too, just between, it's like, how do we keep going as an institution with our mission of, having open doors and discourse about, contemporary art, and doing something that's very actively engaging in making a change this way.
Now I'm really not nervous anymore. I think we've got our arms around the problem, and we've got talent to help us get to the solution. Chris, did you have some question? Yeah.
Well, so how do you plan to approach the financial challenge? What are some of the things that you're looking into? Patrick, you can start. Yeah.
Okay. Well, I think with the formation of our environmental committee and my colleagues here, I think that we'll sort of go through and identify, and we've been working already on this with Les, is like identify sort of our priorities and what's going to make the most impact, and obviously gauge that as alongside like what we think we can do immediate, what we think we need to like kind of put off for a little bit in the future. And I think I'll be working pretty closely with my colleagues here in the museum to, look for these things and understand what it's going to take. And then each project we do here, whether it's an exhibition or, an upgrade to a building, even if it wasn't a part of this program, they all take fundraising to some degree, again, because we're a nonprofit. So there's a lot of work there from our development office and, and our board and these councils that get formed to help the museum. Everybody's like very invested. And I think it kind of takes almost like a hive mind and to move that way, not a single person can like take it all on. And we all have to understand what's possible physically, what's possible financially, so I don't know if that answers your question, but I think it'll take like a big group effort to get through all this. And, I think understanding the problems and understanding what our priorities are the first step in that, and then beginning to dissect that and find out where we can go from there.
Yeah, it's like a multi-pronged approach. I saw a question pop up, and I'm sure that it's the same for Barry. It's making sure that you're also taking advantage of the local utility incentives that they have in place. Barry, your situation is a little different. Anything specific to the financial challenge that you guys have started to look into?
Yeah, I think a lot of it's similar to what Patrick described. To answer the question about the utility incentives that came in, Douglas Emmett definitely has taken advantage of a lot of those incentives over the years from LADWP, which have been really helpful. And there are, continuing incentives that will be, coming into play to continue that, on the retrofit side. I think, but, as Patrick said, really we have to look at this waterfall, and we have to get more granular in terms of what are the opportunities under these categories, and then put some numbers to them and develop an entire strategy around that. And I think that really looking for how these things come together and fit together and where the synergies are, is going to be a key thing, which is always the case when you're trying to do a really, deep energy efficiency effort and not just skim the top off. How can we throw as much stuff into the pot as possible, and then, look at the overall impact? I think when you look at some things, like you might have a way of evaluating an energy efficiency project just on its own. Let's say you're doing a chiller replacement or a lighting retrofit or something like that. There's a certain payback associated with the direct energy savings. But then if we're looking at it in relation to a decarbonization goal, well, we're offsetting the sizing of on-site renewables. We're potentially reducing the amount of power purchase agreements or RECs we have to buy. So all of those things are quote unquote savings that pile up on top of the straight energy benefit of doing an efficiency measure. So looking at this whole process and then filtering it back to the first steps is really going to be critical.
Yeah, I'm really excited to work with you guys on that financial model, and how should we be thinking about returns on investment with a little more nuance in this new environment that we're now operating in. So.
Yeah, and I just would like to say, I think this is, again, a great opportunity. I feel like the Low Carbon Leaders pilot program has provided, at least in my case here at the museum, a really good sort of process to do this, to understand from the research all the way through implementation. I mean, again, I know it's going to take a while, and we're committed to doing that, but I think with this support, it's really great. I wanted to just reiterate that, because I feel like these questions are great, but right here in front of us, we already have beginnings of a pathway towards that, if that makes sense.
Absolutely. We have to have a basis for discussion. Like Barry said, I mean, I think a lot of the projects we get involved with, we're trying to solve a specific problem, right? We're not necessarily taking a comprehensive, holistic look at what's possible, even from an efficiency perspective, but, add in electrification, load shifting, the rest of the opportunities we see on the screen. It's just hasn't been the way that, projects have been developed or originated in the past. And so I think this conversation about, where do we have trade-offs, sort of cross subsidies, synergies, interactive effects is going to be super cool to see, financial and greenhouse gas and some of these things fight each other, right? And like you said, Barry, I think there's a whole rabbit hole that I'm really excited to go down when we start talking about building envelope. Now we're trying to reduce heating loads. It's really inverting a whole set of ideas that I had. So I just learned something that kind of knocked me a little bit in this, and that's always fun.
Yeah, no, just to piggyback off of that, we always, I have another client in Northern California that's looking to deal with a gas-fired boiler and going electrification. And, they put solar window film on the whole building in the last couple of years, but the whole focus was, reducing cooling load.
Right.
And now we look at the different films that are available and, damn, if we had selected a different film, you can drop the heating load through the glass by 40%, single pane glass, just by putting a good film on it. So it might make sense to rip all the film off they just put on, the last 2 years and put a different film on, because of the impact on reducing the heating load, reducing the size of the electric boilers that they have to put in, which then alleviates the power requirements for the building. There's all kinds of cascading impacts that we have to just take a different perspective.
And I think that gets to the regionality, right, of approach, sort of climate zone specific sort of framework that we need to be thinking about this, because even between Northern California and Southern California, answers could be different, or between the Valley, and the West Side, we could have a different solution. So that's exactly the kind of thing that I think is going to be, resonate as we, grow this network of practice and start to uncover these kinds of issues, and new best practices emerge, or at least challenges to argue about.
That's why the storytelling part is also so crucial, right? Amplify the value creation in these projects. So.
Absolutely. Well, I popped back on the screen because we're at the point where we wanted to kind of open it up for any questions from the audience, and just some more free form kind of discussion here. Anything you guys feel like you really want to share or underline about your projects or things that you're particularly excited about. But while we look at questions coming in from the audience, what are you each sort of most personally excited about on these projects? Maybe Patrick, in your role, what for you, just as a dude, is exciting about this project?
Well, I think I mentioned earlier, like I feel like it's a natural fit for us, and I think that doing this work really it sort of backs up just what we care about as an art museum too, like current issues and current topics. And I think this last year really refocused a lot of people. I mean, there was maybe even a little bit of a blessing in disguise there, where it's like everybody kind of had to draw back. I was kind of thinking about what Barry said, just in terms of like, it kind of, I feel like you mentioned this earlier, Barry, that like during that time, like people kind of had to refocus and priorities kind of shifted. So, obviously, there's been a lot of social issues at the forefront of our news, and, environmental is right there too. And I think for a contemporary art museum to be in the forefront of this, that's just exciting for me personally. And I think that my colleagues here would agree too. I think it'll be really fun too, like just interesting to see where we can go. Like I one big thing that obviously we sort of touched on is solar panels and like what that means. I mean, I'm interested And one of the challenges for us is obviously too, there's always like, and I guess I shouldn't say it's probably no less different for less in commercial real estate, but like the aesthetics and the integration of that kind of stuff too, what it means to the architecture and things. So that to me like brings in maybe a little bit of my experience in just like thinking aesthetically in exhibition design or, you know, that way too. So, I mean, seeing real world implementation of things that matter and doing it successfully, I think that's just overall like what excites me about this.
Yeah. Well, green is the new black, you know, so.
Good point. Yeah.
No, but you know, I'm kidding, but I'm not, you know, the aesthetics, like it has to be cool, you know, and you know, there's a reason balloon boxes were popular. There's a reason people buy Teslas. They're cool.
Yeah.
And they work, you know, and they're helping us decarbonize, even the fuel cells. What about you, Barry? You know, you've probably been waiting, licking your chops for one like this.
Yeah, well, maybe Les and I have a little bit longer history than the rest of the folks, but I remember the first Earth Day. So that starting point. And you know, I just think it's really exciting that the focus is on existing buildings, because I know we had a question come in about new construction, but I'm tired of hearing about all these new construction green buildings. Great, you can design net zero buildings out the wazoo, go for it. But how do we deal with the existing buildings? That's the fun part. That's a really impactful thing that we all need to figure out how to do collectively. So, you know, that's one of the things that I'm really excited about this pilot program. And, you know, and also, I don't think I mentioned this earlier that, you know, for Douglas Emmett picking these two projects, the idea is to then replicate, you know, what's learned through their portfolio, which, you know, spans a lot of buildings around, you know, around the LA region. So there's just a lot of, you know, potential here. And we're really at the point of sort of the discovery phase, which is always exciting.
Always discovering. Well, I think this is a great place to, unless we have any other questions from the audience.
There was one question I saw that came in about the solar film comment that I made. So, you know, you can look at the different characteristics of the films on the market, and we always just look over to the column that's got the cooling, you know, heat gain coefficient, and see, okay, the U value for heating, who cares? But now that's not the case. And so what I was referring to is, you know, if you look for that other column, there are some very incredible films out there that still have good performance on the cooling side, but literally cut the U value of the glass, you know, by 40%. So, you know, and they're out there from the main manufacturers, and you know, they might be a little bit more expensive, but it's just a whole, you know, it's looking for something different, and it's available.
Well, I think this is a great one to put a pin in and a plug for our technology showcase, which is date TBC. We're working on some exciting new partnerships to make the event bigger, but it's exactly these types of sort of new issues that come up as we're trying to solve a new problem, right? Before we were trying to reduce kWh, now we're trying to reduce GHGs. And so we're optimizing for a different solution, different approach. So super excited to get more into this, and appreciate the great questions from everybody. So I want to head us into conclude here, guys. This has been a great discussion. I think this is a teaser. I want to encourage folks to jump in, get involved. There are many pathways, as we've talked about. We're all trying to get to the same place. Depending on the siting, the orientation, construction, it's going to be a different solution, but they're great programs. DWP, I should mention, is really tooled up to support these types of holistic programs across the board, from multifamily to cultural facilities and commercial. They are locked and loaded. We're here, and we think that this, picking up on this kind of Mandela quote, you could go fast alone, right? But together we go far, and we got a long way to go. We've got a long way to go to get to 2030 and to get to 2050. So, it can be painful to collaborate sometimes, right? And to share information. But I think this educating out and up is really important for us to build a foundation that we can build on, right? So that these are not one-offs, that these are projects that can scale, so that the work that you're doing at MoCA can be replicated. So what is a case study? I don't know. Let's figure it out. For Barry, how does this scale within Douglas Emmett, but how does this become an example for commercial real estate? And that's what DOE's whole motivation with this is too. So we're trying to, at the local level, try to originate and help think about, what are the important ideas, barriers, best practices to capture here that are those kind of skeleton keys that unlock other doors. We gotta start somewhere. I think someone's asking about the financial barriers, and it can be scary. And God, how would we ever pay for this? What are we trying to do? What are we trying to do, and what are all the benefits that can accrue? I was on a webinar. I was just reminded of a loan program from Fannie Mae, where you can get basically additional loan proceeds if you achieve a minimum 15% energy savings. These types of opportunities are there, and we just have to be mindful and try to keep a broad vision. That's what we're here for. So everybody is busy, including even Barry and Patrick. You guys are running projects. So our job is to keep our eyes up, our antennas out for these types of opportunities and to make them available. So super excited to work with you guys. The team from Commonwealth will be announcing a second tranche of partners here very soon as we grow this program. So doing our part to build and scale as you guys do. So thank you, everybody. It's very exciting set of announcements. We'll be setting through the recap and takeaways and additional resources by the end of the week. Thanks, everybody.